Here are 63 facts about the Roman Empire that you probably didn't know. Every location in the Roman Empire had its own god. When people made dedications to this deity, most of the time they didn't even know its name, so they had to play it safe by calling it the Genius Loci, or literally, the local spirit. Most marriages in ancient Rome were informal agreements between a husband and a wife. If a couple said they were married, they were. If either said they weren't married, they weren't. A party was expected to celebrate the union, and this would vary on scale depending on what they could afford. In 39 AD, the Emperor Caligula fell seriously ill, after which he became unimaginably cruel. He would throw coins at plebs as gifts, but mixed in were shards of metal to inflict pain. He commanded that a random pleb be eaten by wild animals. He said, "I wish that the Roman people had one neck." Priests sacrificed animals in ancient Rome and studied their organs for omens. When searching for these messages from the gods, priests would wear hoods like the blinkers on a horse, so they weren't distracted by the other omens such as the flight of birds or the slithering of snakes. Slaves could be freed by their masters, but did not become Roman citizens. Freed slaves were known as liberti, and upon their death would have legal status of slaves once again. They would beget free children, but could not pass on property or have proper funeral rites. In the Roman world, water travel, by sea or river, was like what rail travel is to us. It allowed them to travel with speed and carry heavy loads over long distances. A grain ship could travel from one end of the Mediterranean to the other in the time it took to travel 75 miles by land. The Romans had very little concept that their actions as humans could drastically alter the environment around them. Pliny the Elder, who wrote about Roman agriculture, believed that even marble would eventually grow back from where it was quarried. Their world was eternal, as it would remain. Although travel by ship was faster and easier than by land, it was still dangerous. Archaeologists have discovered at least 58 shipwrecks off the archipelago of Fornoi, many dating from the Roman period. The wrecks often contained pottery for transporting liquids like wine, olive oil, and fish sauce. In ancient Rome, and some cultures today, it was believed that someone who envied your beauty could turn the evil eye on you. This would make you ill or even kill you. To combat this, in baths where people would see you nude, there would be amusing wall paintings that would make bathers laugh. It was impossible to focus the evil eye on a laughing person. Midwives in ancient Rome were advised not to look at the vagina while the mother was giving birth. It was thought that the mother would involuntarily retract the baby out of modesty. The mother is certainly not smiling. There is 1 in 50 chance that she'd die every time she gave birth. Politics in the early Roman Empire was the business of a few senators, the commanders of bodyguards, ex-slaves, women in the Imperial family, and the emperor. However, the emperor was often out of the loop. In 48 AD, Claudius's wife, Valeria Messalina, married a noble senator and attempted to adopt Claudius's son. Claudius asked one of his ex-slaves, "Am I still emperor?" A Roman triumph was celebrated when a war was won in battle in which at least 5,000 of the enemy were killed. From the foundation of the Republic in 509 BC to the middle of the reign of Augustus in 19 BC, more than 300 triumphs were celebrated. This is at least 1.5 million casualties. Though most wars involved the deaths of tens of thousands, the conquest of Gaul cost the lives of 1 million Gauls, according to Julius Caesar. Crucifixion in the Roman world was reserved for violent criminals, brigands, slaves, or foreign rebels. When Crassus won the Spartacus War in 71 BC, he took 6,000 slaves captive. He crucified them all along the road from Capua to Rome, over 131 miles. It was the largest mass crucifixion in antiquity, tied with Augustus's mass crucifixion of 6,000 sailors in a rebel fleet. The Roman elite were snobs when it came to pubs that plebs spent their evenings in. To the author Juvenal, pubs were dens for thieves and ne'er-do-wells. Roman emperors tried to tax or limit what pubs could serve, but in reality the Roman state did not have the power to control this. Most urban Roman homes did not have kitchens, so plebs had to eat at pubs or restaurants. Trade ships were very common in the Roman Empire. A ship would arrive in a port full of goods to sell. Instead of returning home with the coin it made, The traders would often fill their ships with new goods bought with that coin. They would then sail back to their home port, sell the goods for even more money. The Romans called modern-day Yemen Arabia Felix, which means Happy Arabia. This is because the people were luxurious in life and in death. They would burn their dead with expensive goods like perfume, a luxury that the Romans usually reserved for the gods. Pliny the Elder thought that the Roman Empire lost 100 million sesterces, about 25% of the pay for the entire army, through trade from China, India and Arabia. Spices, pearls and perfume were traded for Roman coin. So dearly do we pay for our luxury and our women, Pliny said. In the early Roman Empire, nearly all the gold, auros, and silver, denarius, coins from the western provinces came from the mint at Rome. These coins pictured were found in Norfolk. They were painstakingly transported from Rome to Britain, mainly to pay the army. During times of peace, the legions were often not replenished when soldiers died of natural causes. It was expensive to train fresh recruits, so they may not have been used for years. When an emperor set his eye on a fresh war, there was often a massive cost in getting the legions back up to full strength. In 43 AD, the Emperor Claudius ordered the invasion of Britain, mainly to strengthen his standing in Rome. He instructed his general, Aulus Plautius, to call for the emperor's help once he was there. Claudius arrived with reinforcements, riding into Colchester, which was the tribal capital, on an elephant. He only spent 16 days in Britain, but he never stopped talking about it. In 279 BC, Pyrrhus, the king of Epirus, won a strategic victory against Rome. One of Pyrrhus's generals congratulated him on the victory. Since Pyrrhus had lost almost as many men as the Romans, he replied, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." Hence the modern term Pyrrhic victory, for victories that are so damaging, they might as well be defeats. Many upper-class Romans loved the city of Athens. The Republican politician Cicero and the Emperor Hadrian both studied there. Some Romans visited the ancient sites for the same reason people do today, to marvel in the achievement of a once great civilization. During the Republic, the chief priest, the Pontifex Maximus, was responsible for keeping a record of the important events of the year, such as the major wars or solar eclipses. These were published annually on the priest's front door and were used by Republican historians as the bare bones of history. Julius Caesar brought so much gold back from his conquest of Gaul that the price of gold at Rome crashed. In the early empire, legionary soldiers were expected to serve 20 years on regular deployment. After this service, soldiers would have served a further 5 years but were exempt from routine duties. After these 25 years, the veterans would be dismissed with a hefty cash bonus. Before Pompey's theatre was built in 55 BC, Rome had no permanent theatre. The elite feared that anyone who built one would become too popular. Instead, huge wooden theatres were constructed and then demolished after spectacles had been held. Brothels in ancient Rome were considered the places of amorality and depravity, but also necessary. In the same way that sewers were dirty and undesirable, they channeled and contained the filth that would otherwise pollute society. The senator and orator Lucius Licinius Crassus held a funeral for his beloved pet lamprey. Another senator, Domitius Ahenobarbus, mocked Crassus for his absurd behaviour. Crassus retorted that Domitius had buried 3 wives without shedding a tear, so who really had the moral high ground? Vedius Pollio was a rich Italian landowner and a personal friend of the Emperor Augustus. He would throw misbehaving slaves into a pool of lampreys and watch them be torn to bits. Most noble Roman men had a personal name, a family name, and a nickname. There were only a handful of personal names, including Gaius and Marcus. Nicknames could be earned, like Scipio Africanus, who conquered much of North Africa, or inherited like Cicero, whose ancestor had a chickpea-shaped nose, hence the name Cicero. Noble Roman women were usually named after their family name. The daughter of Julius Caesar was simply named Julia. To avoid confusion between daughters, all named the same, they were given another name. Aemilia Tertia was the third daughter of the consul Aemilius, for example. Vestal virgins were responsible for maintaining the eternal flame, worship of Vesta, and keeping of wills. They were unusually privileged for women in Roman society, being allowed to sit in the front row of theatres to watch spectacles. It was high treason to have sexual intercourse with a Vestal virgin and punishable by death for both parties. Since virgins of Vesta were sacrosanct, however, their blood was not allowed to be spilt. Instead, they were usually buried alive for their unchastity. Julius Caesar, in his commentary on his war with Gaul, mentions two plebs, Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo, by name. Their first name was given at birth, whereas their second name was a family name. They were the inspiration for the TV series Rome's leading characters. The Emperor Vespasian introduced a urine tax on urine sold to manufacturers for chemical processes. His son Titus complained that it was wrong to tax such a disgusting industry. Vespasian held up a gold coin to Titus's nose and said, "Money does not stink." Historians have estimated that during the Republic, Italy had 700,000 infantry and 70,000 cavalry ready to serve in the army. This is one of the reasons why the Romans won their war against Hannibal Barca of Carthage. In the early Republic, the army was paid for by an annual tax of the Roman people. Accountants would tally the estimated expenditure and set the tax rate to raise the cash. This tax was halted in 168 BC when the Macedonian royal treasury was seized and then used to pay for the Roman army for many years. The Second Punic War from 218 to 201 BC was a colossal struggle between Rome and Carthage for domination of the Mediterranean. So much of Rome's citizen body was directly involved in the war that is comparable to the European citizens participating in the First World War. Soldiers of the late Empire were marked with tattoos or branded with a hot iron, hoping to make desertion less likely. The film Gladiator shows soldiers with this tattoo, although the film is set far too early for this to be authentic. Jupiter was the protector of the city of Rome and symbolised Rome's empire. When foreign diplomats made treaties with the Senate during the Republic, they would sacrifice to Jupiter Optimus Maximus, which means Jupiter the best and greatest, to seal the deal with the mightiest of the Roman gods. The Athenians spent roughly 14 million denarii on the Parthenon and its monumental entrance. In the 130s BC, the Romans spent 45 million denarii on an aqueduct. Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica Serapio failed an election because he asked a farmer whether his hands were so hard because he walked on them. This did not go down well with the farming demographic. After Pompey Magnus conquered much of the eastern Mediterranean, the annual revenue of Rome increased from 50 million denarii to 135 million denarii. Rome won a naval battle against the city of Antium, modern Anzio, in 338 BC. To commemorate this victory, the Romans set up 6 rams, known as rostra, on the speaker's podium. Philip V of Macedon sent the Greek city of Larissa a letter saying that the Roman state had so many citizens because they admitted even ex-slaves to the citizen body. Hannibal set up bronze tablets throughout Italy boasting about the size of his army. Some Italian communities abandoned Rome for Carthage, but most remained loyal. The Roman theatre at Arles was given turrets and turned into a castle in the medieval period. Roman numerals are standardised today, but this was not the case in ancient Rome. For example, the number 9 would be IX, but some 9th Legion standards were written as VIII. Gnaeus Sicinus was given Imperium, the legal power to command an army, in order to fight a plague of locusts in 173 BC. Scipio Aemilianus is said to have wept when witnessing the sack of Carthage, Rome's greatest enemy, in 146 BC. Just as Troy had fallen, Scipio feared that the same fate would befall Rome. 146 BC was seen as a turning point by the Romans. In that year, they destroyed their old enemy Carthage and were dominant in Greece. They had no external enemies, so the Romans turned to fighting each other. Or so the sources say. Under the Roman Empire, Roman soldiers were full-time professionals. They weren't allowed to marry, although many had long-term partners and children. Emperor Septimius Severus, along with a hefty pay rise, allowed soldiers to legally marry. In the late Republic, soldiers received most of their pay from booty captured in war. The first emperor, Augustus, made a central treasury at Rome to give legionaries a regular salary. If thunder was heard while citizens were voting, all legal proceedings ceased immediately. This was seen as a bad omen from Jupiter himself. Scipio Aemilianus, the general who oversaw the destruction of Carthage in 146 BC, made a solemn curse that the land of the once great city forever be sheep pasture. Boudica, the Iceni queen, was the leader of a major rebellion against Rome. Although her revolt was unsuccessful, she is seen as a resistance hero to many people in Britain today. In 48 BC, Pompey the Great was executed by the Egyptian authorities. Julius Caesar was shown his rival's dismembered head and is said to have wept. Caesar wanted to publicly forgive Pompey, not to have his son-in-law die in disgrace. In 106 AD, the Emperor Trajan's armies won victory in Dacia. The region was annexed and riches poured into Rome. To commemorate his victory, a column was erected detailing the course of the war. During the Battle of Perusia in 41 to 40 BC, each side used slingers to harass the enemy. The sling bullets were often inscribed. One bullet from Octavian's camp read, "I am seeking Fulvia's clit," along with a picture of a clitoris. Romans loved their dogs. Their owners often left touching remarks on their graves. One owner said, "I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place, as much as I rejoice when bringing you into my home, into my own hands 15 years ago." Marcus Tullius Cicero made a series of speeches against Mark Antony in 44 and 43 BC that are regarded as the finest character assassination in history. As soon as Antony had the power, he ordered the murder of Cicero. His hands and tongue were nailed to the Senate door. In 1014 AD, Basil II's army defeated the Bulgarians in battle. The Romans took 15,000 soldiers as captives. Basil II ordered that 99 out of every 100 men were to be blinded, the remaining soldier to lead the blind men home. Upon hearing the news, the Bulgarian king had a stroke. When Julius Caesar was a young soldier, he was captured by pirates in the Aegean. The pirates demanded a ransom of 500 kilograms of silver. Caesar was offended at such a petty sum and demanded that they ask for 1,300 kilos of silver.